One of the most important things you should be using when you're modeling are bevels, and you can use them in multiple different ways, and there are also different types of bevels you can use to achieve different effects. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video, and hopefully it's going to help you to create better models in Blender. Alright, so first of all, when I'm modeling, I'm not using bevels when I'm blocking out, unless I'm creating, kind of like a structural bevel like this, like a large one, right? To define the shape of my blockout. Or create like a, large chamfer to do the same, right? But when I'm modeling, I don't use bevel modifier because I wanted to keep it light. Also, I don't want to get influenced by it, but I do want to see the edges and the highlights. So what I'm using is something called cavity, right? So when you go here to this menu, you can turn it on and off and just keep default values, they're perfect. And you can also do it with hard ops by pressing Alt V on the keyboard, and you can toggle it on and off here. Now, when I turn it off, you can see that I cannot determine where this edge here is, right? So if I move it, you can see that, but if I position it like this, it just blends in. So it's really difficult for your brain to understand the design language of what you're trying to achieve. And when you're going to be modeling and blocking out, this is really helpful, okay? So what I do is I turn on cavity and I just keep it on all the time when I'm modeling, all right? So now let's talk about bevels, okay? So now there are multiple different types of bevels, okay? There are procedural bevels, there are structural bevels, there are large bevels, chamfers, small bevels, there's all kinds of bevels, right? So let's start with the basics, okay? You can, for example, use bevels in your blockout stage when you want to soften up your form or add, for example, a planar shift in the form of a chamfer. So let's say I wanted to soften this edge here, right? And I could run a really dense kind of a, round bevel, which is gonna kind of round the corner up for me, right? And that's gonna change the feel of this blockout. I could also go Control B and run a chamfer, right? And for example, maybe, I don't know, make this chamfer a little bit wider here on this side. So you could use it, you could do it manually, or you could use a mesh machine by going to Y menu and simply change width of the chamfer, and you can play with the rotation and then tension and all kinds of stuff here, okay? So you can do it this way. So this will be basically, this will be the two basic tools I'll be using to change the blockout and sort of flesh out additional shapes other than using booleans, because booleans also going to contribute to it. Because, if I'm gonna, run box cutter and I, for example, either taper this, by pressing Shift T, or I'm just going to apply this boolean and, grab an edge of it and chamfer it, right? And so I'm going to be changing the planar shifts or the angles of my mesh to flesh out different effects and, light bouncing and sort of, creating a different shape basically, right? So that's, that's that. Now, there are different types of bevels when we're going to get into kind of procedural bevels and also bevel modifiers that you can apply to your mesh to achieve different effects. And the basic one is going to be the very, the very standard bevel modifiers. So you just go to modifiers here, you go to generate, and you go to bevel. And this is a very basics of Blender. And by the way, if you're a beginner and you're starting in Blender, I would highly recommend you grab our best-selling Jumpstart course, which already helped over 100,000 students. There is a link in the video description, so go ahead and grab it. But if you're seeking more in-depth help with your Blender plasticity journey, then have a look at our Academy program, Hard Surface Academy, which contains all of our products, courses, and add-ons, and also includes private coaching. It's a really amazing program, and students in there growing really fast. Link is also in the video description. But anyway, going back, so this bevel is very basic. What I'm gonna do here is add some segments, and I would need to change some parameters here as well. I'm not gonna be doing it through vanilla Blender because it's too annoying. I'll do it with hard ups. I'm gonna press Q and bevel, and you see when I'm using hard ups, I can very quickly determine the size of the bevel. I have out of the gate, I got the 3 segments here, and everything is set the way I want it to. So when you're modeling something in Blender and you're running just booleans, I would suggest you run a very thin bevel, very small bevel, because it's going to give you this kind of punch to the edges. So maybe a bit larger than the cavity, but that's about it. This will be like a global bevel. Now, problem with global bevel is that it's going to apply kind of like a blanket size of bevels to the whole mesh. You don't want that, because That's boring, okay? The cool thing about, for example, sub D modeling is that when you can, when you model with sub D, so I'll show you. So let's go here to go to Q bevel and press Z, and then I'm gonna go to P to adjust angle and scroll down. So you can actually flex this bevel like this, press A, so we can adjust the size of it. And I'm just going to apply it, okay? So I'm going to I'm going to apply the bevel, and I can see we got these loops, okay? And the distance of these loops from these edges will determine how tight this bevel is going to be. So we're going to go GG in here and move them closer, and I'm going to, move these closer here, right? And maybe move this one closer as well. Okay, you see this corner going to be much more dense, much more tight when I'm going to subdivide it, okay, and remove the not subdivision, the smooth by angle. So you see these angles are much more relaxed, right, and this angle is much tighter. So it's going to, in sub D you can very easily regulate that, because you can move the loops away from one another to make the corner, more relaxed, or bring them closer to make it tighter. Now with a global bevel, this is not really possible because the bevel is applied globally. However, what you can do, you can for example run this bevel with different values. So because you see here, you can choose different limit methods, right? So you could choose an angle limit method, which is the current one. So what it says here, the angle 30 degrees means every single edge on this mesh that's above 30 degrees is going to be beveled with the same value. So you see the amount here, right? So when I change this value, it's gonna gonna change globally for all the edges at this angle, right? But you can change this and you could, for example, mix and match, a regular bevel with something manual, or you could simply introduce bevels to specific edges, right, to run them differently. So let me show you. I'm gonna nuke this. So I'm going to let's just flex this, and I'm going to run a bevel here. So I'm gonna go to edit mode, go to Q menu, and control click on mark with hard obs, and this is gonna allow me to add procedural bevel just to this edge. And this is gonna be driven by a vert group. So these two verts are assigned to the vert group, to this bevel, and this bevel is actually using vert group, right? See that? Its limit method is to vert group. So these two vertices are assigned to this bevel, so the other edges are not being influenced by it. So now you can also run, for example, bevel here. So Q control mark, and we're gonna have a different group of verts assigned to it, so I can assign different value, right? And on top of this, I can stack a procedural bevel by going to Q and holding control. And I got 3 bevels, okay? 1, 2, 3, right? So now I can control them individually using Q menu. So watch, I go to Q, I go to bevel, and I adjust this one, press Q, I adjust this one, press Q, I adjust this one, right? You can do it with vanilla blender, but I'm over 50, so fuck that. Anyway, that's how I'd run basically bevels if I needed a specific angle, or like, a value for a specific edge on my mesh, right? And then again, you can, adjust them. So this one could be really thin, this one could be a little bit more tight, and this one could be, much more relaxed. You see, and we got some interesting stuff. So it's similar to what you would get with subdivision modeling, right? So there you go. But it's procedural, so you can remove them, right? It's easier to remove them, because if I nuke them, I'm back to a cube. You know what I mean? Because it's procedural, right? So that's the trick. Now, next way of applying bevel would be to apply them by edge weight. So what you could do, you could assign weight to specific edges, and this is really helpful when you have, angles that cannot be beveled. Let me explain. So if I run a loop here, right, and I'm gonna move this edge a little bit higher, so the angle is gonna be here, definitely not 30 degrees. So if I'm gonna run a bevel here, you see this angle will not be caught because it's below 30 degrees, right? So I would need to move it higher, right? See, for this to get beveled, but I don't want to. I want to keep it low, right? So now my bevel set to, when the limit method is set to angle, will not work, right? I need to change it to something called weight. I could also go with vertex group, but weight's going to be easier to control. Because all I need to do now, I need to assign weight to all my edges, right, that I want bevel to be present on, right? So whichever edge I want to run bevel on, I need to assign bevel weight to it. So I can select, all these edges, And I could do it with hard obs. We're going to Control Q and simply go to here to sharpening. You see, when I apply mark to my edges, I'll apply all the values, including crease, B weight, seam, sharp. I really don't need them, so I could do it with hard obs by simply pressing Q and mark. Or you could just go to right click with Blender Vanilla and go here to B weight, and then press 1 and enter, which is going to allow you to adjust the bevel weight. The strength of this weight on the bevel. You want to set it to 1 to make it at full strength. And now if I switch the bevel from from angle, right, you see, to weight, right, is going to catch this this edge here. You see that this edge now is caught. If I switch to angle, it's gonna disappear, right? So that's how you do it. So when you got a tricky situation like this, that's how you solve this, right? So that would be bevel weight. Now, there are other ways of adding bevels. Like I told you, you could add, for example, bevels manually by simply, Control B and adding bevels like this. The issue with this one is that when you bake them into the mesh, it's going to be really difficult to remove them, right? Now, you can remove them with tools like, for example, Mesh Machine. So you can select here, click select here, go to Y menu and simply unbevel, right? And then select this one here and, we could go to Y and, for example, unbevel as well, and you back to normal, right? But with vanilla Blender, it's gonna be a bit more tricky. But you can you can do it with add-ons, right? Which is why we use add-ons. We use hard obs, box cutter, machine tools, mesh machine, and other stuff like Material Works, our own add-on for texturing and detailing. But we also use stuff like Cablerator, etc. But you don't really need many add-ons. You just need to use add-ons that gonna fit your workflow, right? So I'm not saying use the ones I'm using. I'm saying use the ones that fit your workflow, because different people have different needs. Okay. If you're, for example, doing a lot of sub D, you're still gonna be benefiting a lot from Mesh Machine, hard obs, and also our add-on Material Works. But you might be willing to use other add-ons, specifically for sub D, right? So just like I, for example, used in one of our courses, the subdivision course, which is a heavily add-on driven course, because the only way to mentally, survive sub D without being forced into psychiatric therapy is to use add-ons, okay? Because if anyone is using vanilla Blender to run sub D, they need fucking help. Anyway, what I was saying, bevels, right? So that's another way of doing this, right? Manually adding bevels to your mesh. Another thing you can do, you can stack multiple sizes of global bevels. Remember I told you that running just one size of a bevel is boring? Okay, check this out, right? Let's say I wanted to have, a regular bevel on this cube, and I wanted to have it really supple. So I'm gonna go here up to, I don't know, like let's say 15 segments, okay? So it's really supple, looks a bit like a sub D cube. Now, what if I wanted to cut now into this mesh with a boolean, right? If I do that, I'm gonna get the same bevel, okay? The same size, because, I have only one bevel running on this mesh, this one, right? So if I'm gonna, get this, recover this cutter, and I wanna move it closer to the edge of the cube, right here, on the y-axis, you see, we're gonna get this issue. Why? Because now bevel flips under itself, and it collides with the verts of the two bevels, right? I'll show you in a minute what I mean. They literally flip under one another. So watch this, right? If I'm going to enable wireframe here, so mesh tools, settings, wireframe. And if I'm going to see that this is a bevel running on the mesh and this is a bevel running on the cube, I'm on the cut, right? So if I'm going to move my cube here, watch this, right? See, that's where the problem starts. So this bevel is too large to get so close to the edge of the cube. So what's the solution, right? Well, we run a different bevel. So watch this. What I can do with hard obs, right? Run something called step bevel, which is going to add a bevel which is half size of the previous bevel. So this bevel, right, is of, let's just put it to, I don't know, 0.3, okay, or 0.25, just to be precise, okay? And I'm gonna run a step bevel now. So watch this. I'm gonna go to operations and just click on step. This is gonna add another bevel, and look at the value. Is exactly half of the value of the previous bevel, right? So now when I'm gonna run a boolean, right, this mesh is gonna, this bevel is gonna be much smaller, and you can make this bevel even smaller. So if I go to bevel and press Q, I can adjust this bevel, right? And if I press Q again, I can adjust this bevel. I can make it really small. So I could technically run new cuts with a new bevel while having the main bevel being active. right? So you got, and you can keep stacking them, you know, deeper, and eventually it's gonna break, but you get like, you know, 3 or 4 of them, you know, stacked on top of one another. Just gotta be careful with one thing, okay? When you apply your booleans using smart apply, using hard ops, the first bevel is gonna get applied, yeah? So watch this. If I go to Q menu and go to operation smart apply, see that first bevel got baked, okay? So this is actually a baked geometry, meaning it's actually running on your mesh, so you can't change it. So be careful, okay? So I would keep it procedural as long as you can. In addition, you can also change a number of segments on this bevel, right? So you can go down here to, you know, to, I don't know, 3 of them, for example, and then we press P to change the profile, you know, and we pitch it, right? And then we need obviously weighted normal modifier, so add that and we're good to go. So if I'm going to now turn off this wireframe, you see we're looking peachy, right? So that's how you do it. And you could just, you know, make this bevel really small to make it really, really kind of tiny, just a highlight. And this one's gonna be, you know, kind of a soft, fluffy bevel. In addition, you can mix and match hard bevels, meaning bevels baked into Geo by applying bevels on your live cutter. So if I, you know, if I do something like this, I could create another bevel. It's gonna be a bit of a different size than this one, but this one's gonna be, you know, baked into my boolean. However, what you can also do, you can use this trick I showed you with control mark, right? So go here, select an edge, go to a mark and control click that edge, and you're going to create a procedural bevel. On that boolean, you can also mirror it to the other side. So when you're going to be adjusting the bevel, you're going to adjust both edges at the same time. See that? So now when I grab this boolean, go to Q menu, I can adjust the bevel on both edges because it's mirrored, right? So you got 3 procedural bevels, right? You got the one on the boolean, you got the one on a cube and another one on a cube, right? So there you go. Another way of running bevels, and this is really something I like to use a lot, and I use it with our add-on Materialworks, is when you have a really complicated mesh and you can't be fucked to clean it, okay? So let's say you got a really complicated mesh. I'm not gonna be creating complicated mesh, but you know, I'm just gonna do a few cuts. And this cut's gonna be really shallow like this, right? Something like this, and you know, really shallow. And you wanted to run a bevel on these edges, and you know, let's say the mesh was much more complicated, and at this stage it's really easy to do that because all I do is run a bevel and it's gonna be fine, right? But things are gonna break when you, for example, have a sphere. Let's subdivide it and apply visual to mesh. We're gonna duplicate this sphere, scale this, we're going to boolean this, so you know, control minus to boolean this, and we're going to apply this, right? So smart apply, and I'm going to now grab this edge here, okay, and you know, and I'm gonna sharpen it, right? So sharpen it. Now if I wanted to bevel this edge, okay, I would need to clean up the entire mesh, okay? Because look, if I run the bevel on this one, right, I'm gonna have a disaster, right? Because I'm gonna have all these overlapping verts, right? So you can do this very easily with a procedural bevel, but for this to work, you need to be in cycles, okay? So you go here to cycles, and I'm gonna be using our add-on right now. So go to end panel and material, and you can get this add-on with our coaching offer, which is the Academy offer. So go ahead, click the link in the video description and check out our Academy program. It includes all of our premium programs, Materialworks, and 6 months of private coaching. It's an amazing program. So again, link in the video description, right? All right, so let's just you know, pop an HDRI, easy to clicks, and we're gonna pop you know, some metal, and now you see like you have this really clean, beautiful edge. And if I'm gonna add a bevel, you know, by using modifier, disaster. It would take ages to clean this shit, okay? You could use stuff like, for example, mesh machine. Go here to, you know, select this edge, alt click, then go to Y and boolean cleanup. But even with boolean cleanup, you know, you will have to clean even more because you see still breaking, right? So even that doesn't work. So watch this. I click on the bevel here, and then I'm gonna switch this to 16 samples, which is gonna be really clean. Look at this bevel. It looks beautiful. And you see you get this illusion of a bevel. You can change the width as well. You can't overdo it though, but if you want like a tiny highlight like this, it works perfectly. So you can just apply a blanket, you know, bevel to your mesh, and all the tiny edges you can be butter cleaning gonna get highlighted, right? So this is what I would do when you're running renders and you don't really need the bevel over there, right? Or you just want to preview how this mesh would look with bevels, do you know what I mean? So that's what I would do. And there you go, that's it. I mean, these are all the major tricks with bevels that you should be using. So to sum it up, remember about using just manual bevels, Control B, so then the bevel, the chamfer, so the fillet and the chamfer, to create planar shifts like soft transitions. Then you have subdivision, which is another way of using, applying bevels. Then you got bevel modifier, and remember about these different ways of limiting the bevel, so the angle, the weight, the vertex mode. Then you got the bevels in edit mode, and then you got the step tool from Hardups and Box Cutter, which is going to allow you to run multiple bevels on your mesh with booleans, and they're all going to be live. And lastly, you can mix and mesh them together to create some cool shit. And that's about it, right? So there you go. And like I said, if you're new to Blender, check out our Jumpstart 2.0 course. Well over 100,000 students in the course. They fucking love it because it's brilliant. Just 3 hours long, and it's going to teach you all the essentials, all the basics to make you kind of understand, oh shit, okay, that's Blender, right? And you can go, start having some fun. But if you're serious about learning and you want to improve quickly, then definitely grab our Hard Surface Academy program, which includes all of our premium courses, add-ons, and like I said, 6 months of intense coaching. It's the best program for Blender right now for hard surface, no questions about it. And if you want to check our credentials, we have a massive website with testimonials. Go ahead, you can read them. The link is also in the video description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.